your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
Good evening, this is Your Voice with the NRP, aired every Monday, 8:30 to 10, with the leadership of Nevis's most transformative party, the Nevis Reformation Party, comes here to dialogue with you. It's Monday, June 20th, which means that the sun enters the summer solstice tomorrow, June 21st. But it's already hot. June has been hotter than July in every sense of the word. And so much has been happening in our federation as we rumble on towards the July general elections. Now, what's been happening? Financial Secretary retired Lionel Laurie Lawrence, a man not given to hyperbole, says we need to get back to the fundamentals of fiscal discipline, debt management, and creating the enabling environment to stimulate local and foreign investments. Week out from the next general elections, why haven't the leader of the Concerned Citizens Movement inked a new Charlestown Accord with his newly found and most trusted ally across the Narrows, the leader of the People's Action Movement, Sean Richards? That's the big question. A foundation member of Team Unity says that he's seen little to suggest that Sean Richards ever showed interest in fair share or indeed the Charlestown Accord. And we'll also try to unravel why the name of Van Samway, former Premier, seems to be taboo as we discuss this fair share issue. We'll discuss all these issues and more as we make our way through one of the most intriguing epochs in our political history. Our special guest tonight is Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, leader of the Nevis Reformation Party. And as she gets her notes together, let's take a time out and listen to a little bit of political satire.
Three of them come like trees, blind man. Don't you know, man, leaving have barrow. They're running about on deceptive strife, cutting their tails with Venezuela's knife. If you ever see such jackasses in your life as them.
Now this one was written in 1976, and from the album I Put On My Guns Again. Is it still relevant in today's St. Kitts and Nevis? We have to discuss all of these issues and more. But of course, I have to do a little bit of housekeeping. First, let me give a shout out to a young man from Hamilton. His name is Kevin Hanley. Approached me on Saturday. He's about 10 or 11 years old, and he basically said that he listens to this program every Monday night, and he asked me to give him a shout out. So 10 or 11-year-old Kevin Hanley, good evening to you. I know you're a student of the Charlestown Primary School, so it's coming to the end of term, and of course you've got your exams. I hope you've got that down pat, but it's very good that you listen to programs like these, because we come here every Monday night because we want to make life better for young people like you. And also over there in St. Kitts, Ambassador Sam Conda, listening to you on Friday afternoon and Groundings on Freedom Radio. You made a very interesting comment that based on what you've seen, Sean Richards show little interest in fair share. But our Premier on Nevis is putting all the hopes and aspirations of the people in Nevis on him. If you're available, I'd like you to give us a call, because you've always said that you would like us to have truth and reconciliation. And I think we could get to the bottom if you give us a few minutes of your time so that we could untangle all this. Dr. Janice, very good to have you here this evening. No, it's been a busy day. It's been a busy 2 weeks since the campaign was launched, and I know you've got to do your usual shout-outs.
Well, thanks, Steve. It's my pleasure to be here. And of course, the shout-outs are in order to all of the listening audience here in Nevis, in St. Kitts, and across the Caribbean and the US and Canada and England. All of the places where we know Nevisians are quite popular, especially in the USVI. My children are there. My mother is there. In the US, where my sisters are, and in England, where I have a sister also. But you know, it dawned on me that each time that I come here, it's just a situation where we seem to send shout-outs to people who are far and abroad. And tonight I would really want to send a shout-out to my group of people who have been here on the ground working with me. They know who they are. We have the St. James's constituency group, and now with the federal election upon us, the St. Thomas's constituency group, and the various committees which we would have established. And it's hard work, and I must extend appreciation to all those persons who would give up their time and their efforts and provide ideas to ensure that Nevis can be back onto a path of prosperity. We have volunteers mostly who recognize that this is really a defining moment in the political history of St. Kitts and Nevis, and NRP, who would have started the political journey in Nevis. Certainly it's going to feature at this juncture. I can recall that when NRP and PAM would have formed the coalition to ensure that we got independence and that the interests of Nevis was well represented in the Constitution. I can see where we are at this juncture, where we must ensure that whatever happens in this historical moment in the political history of St. Kitts and Nevis, NRP certainly is going to be there, because it is always the focus and the priority of the Nevis Reformation Party to ensure that the people of Nevis are in a position where they can enjoy the necessary rights based on the Constitution, where the people of Nevis do not have to struggle unnecessarily. And so we're at a turning point right now, and we have been sending out our messages, getting people to understand that this is not ordinary election. And I'm getting the feeling that people are recognizing that more has to be done this time. And so to those persons who would have been working with me tirelessly, the entire NRP contingent, so to speak, I must tonight take a moment to acknowledge their assistance, their hard work. We don't always get it 100% right, but I think that we understand the gravity of where we are right now and what needs to be done. And so I must say to the NRP executive, all of the other NRP candidates, and the various constituency groups, tonight the shout out is really about them, and to be thankful for their support thus far and for their ongoing support.
And of course, since the very successful launch of Friday, June 3rd, just over 2 weeks ago, other than hitting the pavement, you've been out there on the hustings, on average 3 times a night. That's pretty tough work. How has it been going?
Well, it's tough work, yes, but when you recognize the importance of what you are working for, people say, choose a career that you love, and it would never seem like it's work. My throat didn't get that message yet.
No, I noticed that.
It didn't get that message yet, that this is absolutely what has to be done at this point in time. And so it's not just, the public meetings and the radio shows, but, the house-to-house, and interestingly, you would set aside a certain amount of time, and the intention is to cover from point A to point B. And it's amazing the amount of questions that people have to ask, and it's really, how did Nevis get to this point? And there's always going to be 1 or 2 persons who will reflect on the days when NRP came about, and what they stood for, and how the whole of Nevis was really behind NRP. They would talk about how Nevis would have changed when, after independence, and we were really, on that path to secession, even before independence. And so I've listened to so many persons, and, the nostalgia is really there. I mean, this afternoon I spoke with a lady, and, she reflected on the days of the early NRP, my father and the others, and how it was such a joy to participate. And after, when leaving, she said, if I was a little bit younger, I would have followed you on the house-to-house campaign. And so there's a lot of that kind of nostalgic, Nevis was this at one point in time. How have we arrived at the point where we cannot pay our civil servants comparable salary increase as what is happening in St. Kitts? How have we arrived at such a point where we started off with geothermal energy as such a opportunity for the people of Nevis, and we're now having to pay these humongous electricity bills? And so as I travel the communities and I speak with persons, you're getting the feeling that, we took a chance, and we recognize that we messed up. We took a chance. And so we know now that NRP is a party that really has the best interest of the people of Nevis at heart. And so I'm quite encouraged as I go house to house and speak to persons, and as they reflect, they recognize that better can be done, and they're quite prepared to give NRP that chance again to put Nevis back onto the right path.
Yeah, well, keep the faith.
Absolutely.
I've heard it in your throat on several occasions on the campaign trail. But I think we're into a sprint now. I made the bold prediction last week that we will go to the polls on Friday, July 15th, no later than Monday, July 18th. Culturama starts on the 21st, goes to August 2nd. To wait for the last few days before August 8th would be to take our democracy to the nth degree. So I think we're into the last 4 weeks of campaigning. And so energy up, and prayers go up for you and the Nevis Reformation Party. Now the CCM has run a campaign which I called a one-track pony, a fair share. And I asked the question, how come, if that's all that we're about, how come that our leader, who says that it's a good thing that he's a lawyer and he has learned to document, hasn't sat down, invited Mr. Sean Richards over to sign a document which would bear his own signature? Because he has said he's always looked at the signatures on the Charlestown Accord, and they, of course, Premier Van Samwe, who's no longer with us, Prime Minister Timothy Harris, who he has said is null and void. So there's only one man standing. And if he's putting all his eggs in that basket, they really should sign an accord. As a matter of fact, I bought him some paper. Since he can't find the paper, I bought him a blue one and a yellow one, a gold one, hoping that in the next couple of weeks, because in 2014, December 17th, they did it 2 months in advance. And here's another opportunity. If you believe in accords, then he should really document it. We really can't go through and vote on the basis of a promise, when in the first instance a written document didn't work. However, I believe he was your classmate at the Charlestown Secondary School, Larry Lawrence. And as I said, he is not a man given to excesses, not often on Facebook, but he made this post last week. Fair share is a utopian idea. It will only happen when Jesus returns and take charge of our world. While we fight for fair share, let us try to find creative ways to expand the Nevis economy so we could be truly financially independent. The Europeans are already targeting the CBI programs, linking them to tax evasion and money laundering. It is only a matter of time before the gravy train crashes. We need to get back to the fundamentals of fiscal discipline, debt management, and creating the enabling environment to stimulate local and foreign investments. And I'll share with you a couple of responses to that post. Michael Dorr, we call him MD. If Laurie speaks, I respect that man's fiscal leadership. A totally different and progressive leader from the present myopia that we operate under. Stocky Stapleton from Brown Hill, a cousin of the Premier. Wise man, free lecture that I'm sure will fall on deaf ears. Valerie Thompson, I believe a former teacher of the Premier. Laurie words are the same wise words we grew up hearing from our parents. It still holds true today. And finally, Shante L. Brooks. Many people enter politics and government and think they're playing dolly house, or they handle governing like they're the only ones that will feel the effect of their bad decision or non-vision. Of course, Nevisian civil servants and pensioners have already felt that effect, with our representatives in Bastille getting their 10% while they were given a 5%. A reaction to the post by your schoolmate.
My schoolmate, my classmate, and I think that what Laurie would have written is really the sentiment of the NRP with regards to the reason why NRP would have joined a coalition with PAM to ensure that Nevis attained home rule and be able to direct its development based on the ability to create certain ordinances and to be able to attract business based on its the unique constitutional arrangement that we have. And so while we would have been hearing the cry for the fair share, and while we would have been not hearing an account for the $400 million that was sent over to Nevis, what is missing really is what has the CCM government done to generate revenues in Nevis. And so it is very easy to see that the $400 million was used to operate and to run the government of Nevis. There was a total disregard for the power that lies in the NIA to develop its own program. And I often speak of where we would have been when on the NRP the geothermal ordinance was established, and we started on a course to develop geothermal energy. We would not have to be, at this point today, burdening the people of Nevis with commercial loans to pay for energy production. And so what Larry would have stated in that post is essentially that Nevis was already self-sustaining, and we have the ability to be self-sustaining if you have the leadership that understands as times change, you must also change, you must diversify, you must be innovative and find ways to keep your country going. And one of the things I would have said before, this is even before we got to where we are at this point with the federal election, is that when we look at the CPI program that has really been the staple of the national economy for quite some time, what we have seen is that the program did not just sit. It was not a stagnant program. You'd have seen variations to the program that allowed the CPI program to broaden and have more opportunities for people to invest. And one of the things that we find missing is the fact that Nevis has not really developed any avenues of bringing income into Nevis. We know that the issue of the fair share is relevant because it was not specifically addressed in the Constitution. CPI was not contemplated at the time of the Constitution. And so there's nothing that prevents Nevis from developing its own CPI. And one of the things I have always said is that growing up, we can recall when we had a federal office here in Nevis, right there on
Government Road.
On Government Road, and people knew that the issuing of passports was a federal function, and if you needed a passport, that is where you would go. And as we see different developments, back in the day we didn't have the STEP, the PAP, the PEACE, all of these federal programs. We now have our fisheries under a federal act because of the negligence of the CCM government at the time to ensure that based on the Constitution that gave the NIA the authority to manage its fisheries, that is now part of the federal government's mandate. We look at maritime affairs. So there are federal programs which we recognize by virtue of our Constitution must be administered by the federal government. What is missing, though, is the fact that the people of Nevis should have access to federal programs right here in Nevis. We should not have to pay a ferry fare to go over to St. Kitts to deal with certain matters. And so, while we would have had a federal government here, which is, back in the day, that it served its purpose, but we really need to have a proper federal building, so to speak. There is no reason why the PAP and the STEP and all these are managed by the NIA, because they're not NIA programs. And the Premier himself would have said he has no ability to put people and take people off, etc. So why spend the little resources that we have in the NIA to administer these programs when they really should be administered by the federal government? And so having a clear separation between the federal responsibilities and the NIA responsibilities, I think would go a long way in terms of helping the citizens of Nevis, the residents of Nevis, to appreciate what is federal and what is local, and then we would clearly see. Forget about the well, I wouldn't say forget about it, but set the CBI program apart. This came about. What was done to, say, develop a CBI program for Nevis? Yes, we know it's attached to the passport, that is national security. So we have a number of development projects in Nevis, and I think in the Charlestown Accord it spoke about once the NIA approves a project for citizenship, then the federal government is supposed to approve it, right? So if that is the case, why don't we have the availability of the CBI staff here, where if someone has a question and they go to the federal building, they can pick up the phone, they can ask, what is required, etc. Why do our developers have to go over to St. Kitts to deal with those matters? And so when you look at these different scenarios, as my classmate would have said, you really need a creative mind to determine how best can you position Nevis to grow and to develop. And with the federal building here that deal with the federal programs, of course you would employ residents of Nevis to operate that office, but then it would minimize the burden of our people having to travel back and forth to St. Kitts. And so these are the kinds of things that you would want to see in place, where you would want to see, while we understand that as a federation, the federal government has certain responsibilities as an umbrella over St. Kitts and Nevis. But the part that has really been missing for this CCM government is the fact that NIA has its own ability to develop and to ordinances and laws to direct the development. And so when we speak about progressive legislation that would appeal to foreign investors, that is what Laurie spoke about. We need to be able to attract investors so that we can have a good flow of foreign direct investment. And when you look over the last 7 years, where do we really see that type of development on Nevis that would be able to bring in foreign investment? And there are a couple of ideas that we have looked at NRP that we really want to advance with regards to our natural environment, with regards to diversification of our tourism industry. And so those are areas where we feel that had the $400 million been targeted to address certain issues, then we would have been in a position of more resilience and more sustainable going forward. But unfortunately, we hear about the $400 million, and to this day, people are still trying to figure out where it went, because you add up all of the developments, all of the projects that we see ongoing, and you're far, far, far from $400 million. And so I think the article was right on. I know Laurie from going to school, and he's not one. I mean, I am still amazed that he actually, made that post, because I know him to be someone that is, very reserved, and I would imagine that, like myself, involved in politics at this time, I was never one, to thought that I was going to be in politics. But when you recognize what is happening, and you have that inner emotion where you just cannot sit back and be complicit, as they would say. And I think that is probably what happened to Laurie. We're hearing all this talk about fair share, and we're not getting our fair share. And Laurie, he just probably could not take it anymore.
It leapt out of his being.
Yes, and so he just said, listen, this fair share talk is not what it is. The NIA has a responsibility and the ability to generate its own revenues and to attract foreign direct investment. And so I can see where, you know, he would make such a statement, because this talk and this talk at the, you know, minds of the people that we have been given a raw deal and we have not received what is rightfully ours. Yes, we know what is rightfully ours, but with 3 seats strong and 7 years to table the necessary legislation, as a lawyer at that, I mean, you cannot come out of the classroom and then make noise because you didn't get to take the test.
Mhm.
You have to stay in the classroom and demand that you get the test. And then if you're not given the test, then you make noise because you were there and you had your comrades around you, you had your colleagues. That's the strongest representation that Nevis can have in the federal government, having all 3 seats of the same party and your colleagues in St. Kitts and PAM. So where we are right now, I mean, I think it is clear and everybody understands that there was negligence, there was mismanagement of funds, and clearly the interest of the people of Nevis was not first and foremost in the minds of the representatives who were elected to look out for the best interests of the people of Nevis.
Does it baffle you, therefore, as it baffles me, that a man who has been the loudest voice for Fair Share, who said that he wrote the Charlestown Accord, that with the former Premier no longer with us, with the Prime Minister, he says, is discarded, and that PAM and CCM represents the real unity. Does it baffle you that he hasn't put pen to paper, having the experience of the first failed experiment, that he hasn't sought in any way, shape or form try to put something in place, while they're shouting from Nevis and from St. Kitts that we're going to have new unity and it's going to be between PAM and the CCM? Why hasn't he committed something to paper? Or does he realize belatedly that it was a fool's errand?
Well, you know, maybe he recognizes that it doesn't make sense to make an agreement with PAM because PAM is not going to feature in the elections. And so whatever reason he would have had to make this pre-election alliance with PAM, I think it was, you know, foolhardy, for lack of a better way of expressing it, that you are in Parliament with 3 parties, you come out of Parliament and want to form a coalition with 2, well, you know, just a partnership. And so the issue must be that PAM is not really a factor for CCM. PAM was a factor to get to where they are right now. And it's interesting that over and over again, I guess whatever analysis they would have done, they continuously want to align NRP with PLP. And I think his intention was to paint PLP, the Prime Minister and PLP, as worse than Satan in hell, where they want to go. And based on the analysis, I find it interesting. NRP having been aligned with Labour, there's no talk at all about NRP and Labour. It is all this talk about NRP and PLP. And I, as leader of NRP, would have said on many occasions that NRP is not having any pre-election alliances whatsoever. A proper coalition would be based on who the people of Nevis elect to represent them and who the people of St. Kitts elect to represent them. And so trying to force a coalition prior, you must wonder what is the real motive. And I often wonder why NRP haven't been aligned with Labour before. There is no talk about NRP and Labour. And so I'm sorry for Pam.
You're sorry for Pam.
I'm sorry for Pam because they have been used, and now the Premier is not talking about NRP and Labour because he probably knows what he has up his sleeve with Labour, and so he's not going to say NRP is with Labour. He's going to want to put NRP with PLP. But NRP has a record of knowing what its objectives are going into the federal government and working with any government in the federal under the federal arrangement to accomplish what we set out to accomplish. I cannot say that that is the same for CCM, and the people of Nevis ought to recognize that NRP has always accomplished what it set out to do under any federal arrangement. And so it's not for self-advancement, but it's really to ensure that the people of Nevis can be better positioned based on whatever federal relationship or whatever coalition may exist. And so right now we have to acknowledge that in this federal election, when you look at what is happening and who we are being suggested as being aligned with, they've done the analysis, and they really, who can they really align with? They already had a big issue, the motion of no confidence against Dr. Douglas and the Labour. Come back again with a motion of no confidence against PLP in that construct. So really, they really had no choice but, I guess, to form a pre-election alliance with PAM. But I don't put it past the Premier to be having some little discussions elsewhere, because we know he's quite capable of doing that based on facts, historical facts.
We'll take a break in a moment, but I'll share an experience that I had this morning at breakfast. I broke a saucer. And I've been saying since this campaign started that when you mash something up, you break something up, there are splinters all over the place. I mopped up right after. That was about 8:30. As I put my shoes on tonight, I was still finding fragments on the rug. For all those who think that you can have a three-party coalition, just take away one element and everything fits together, is joke they're making. We'll take a break then we'll be right back.
But the economy is broken, the government stick, and the opposition come and take a seat. The debt is high and employment's low, and it's the poor people who taking the blow. I say we tired, we need a revolution. We just can't depend on vaccination. I say we tired, time to pick myself off the floor. Just remember, people matter more. So when you hear them talking bull on the radio, people used to matter more. Whether you red, blue, orange or yellow, people used to matter more. But when they needed us for last election, we were always the first option. But now they in and they comfortable. People don't matter no more. Why? Some people may not like this, but people used to matter more. CCM them made a slogan out of it. People used to matter more.
And we're back with Your Voice with the NRP, sponsored by the Nevis Reformation Party. Now, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, one of the things Larry spoke about, and you spoke about it, was attracting, creating an enabling environment so that we could attract not only local but foreign direct investment. And as everybody know, I love Indian Castle. I've spoken about it here before. It's one of my favorite haunts in Nevis, walking the beach and looking at Montserrat and Redonda and the Atlantic breezes coming across. And of course in its more pristine state with animals galore, a showpiece. And I like it a lot, and I've spoken previously about a gentleman who came here and said that he has been on a mission for the last 13 years to develop a hotel there. Of course, previously called a man, now called One and Only. After multiple hours of radio and television time, the Premier has not responded to this gentleman. Now for the history, Indian Castle is made up of 396 acres purchased in 1957 at great pains by Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw. As a matter of fact, it was owned by an Antiguan, last name Lake. And he didn't want to sell, but Bradshaw was insistent that he would get this for the benefit of the people of Nevis. In fact, he had to use a gentleman called George Bellot, a Dominican who worked at the Agriculture Department, as an intermediary. And eventually what they had to do was get the owner to deposit the money in a bank account, because he didn't want to part with that estate. Along with New River, one of the two best estates in Nevis. Of course, Hamilton has had its glory days as well. The Premier seems mortally afraid of mentioning the word one and the word only. Why hasn't he come to us and tell us what is the state of that project? The man has said that if December 2022 comes, he's going to put his hand up in the air. Why hasn't he said something to us? The man has said that he has got title to the prize Indian Castle estate. Make that make sense for me.
We can recall that there was the interest to develop Indian Castle under the Aman brand, and I think that was really a sincere and earnest attempt to develop Indian Castle. As the Aman brand, they would have looked at the current uses of the area, the horse racing area, the fisherman area, and the design was really to incorporate those existing uses as amenities to the Aman development. It was a strict, developers initiative, and you apply to the government and you get your approvals with the necessary conditions to ensure that you comply with the environmental and development laws. I don't think the Premier is in a position to speak about One and Only for one simple reason, that they have found it necessary to make themselves part and parcel of One and Only. And so how can you require or demand that you be members of the board of directors of a development entity that you must then regulate? It is very difficult, because you know how boards operate, and if the government, who has the responsibility to ensure that you would be afforded certain concessions and to ensure that you'd provide certain corporate social responsibilities, I still cannot understand why the Sicilian government felt that they should be a part of that board in that way. And so it is very difficult and very challenging, because whatever mandates or whatever requirements or whatever penalties they may have to impose on the developer, they're imposing it on themselves because they're part of the governing body of one and only. And so I don't know who would have provided that advice, because they really cannot now hold one and only to any development requirements without tarnishing themselves. And so I think that is one of the concerns. The second thing is, was one and only really brought here as a development project, or was it brought to really make people believe that something is happening? And I think the people of Nevis can recognize and understand when you have real development coming. I mean, to develop in Nevis right now, we're so dependent on the external world with regards to the fluctuating prices of oil. When you're setting about to develop these large tract properties, you want to have some sense of stability, and so where one and only is right now with the continued increase in the cost of electricity, it's very difficult to make any kind of projections about what you're going to do. And as I have said over and over again, what has the CCM government done to make Nevis unique and appealing to whether it's tourists or investors, etc.? There is nothing really at this point in time that has been done. We speak about the Nevis Naturally brand, but when you look at the natural areas around Nevis, they've been abandoned. We look at the wall there at Courses Alley, that it gave a good story.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the hike up to the waterfalls, it's a treacherous hike, and people are not going there because they want that challenge. They'll go up to Nevis Peak if they want that. They want to go there and enjoy the waterfalls, but there has been no investment to develop that area. And so when you look at what has been done to really enhance and position Nevis to attract investors, one and only, there's one gentleman here. He must require investors, external investors, and so he can bring them. And when he brings them, they're going to look at the cost of developing the property, and yes, you'll get some concessions. Every other Caribbean island is providing concessions, but we have not. CCM government has not positioned Nevis in a way that people can come here and say, this has to be the place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, we can remember when Four Seasons came here, and the nice coconut trees that, it was something unique. It was
Mm-hmm.
something different. Unfortunately, whether it's because of the Four Seasons development or not, we don't have that unique feature that we once had. But these are things, and there are other areas where we can develop Nevis into making it truly appealing. We look at our mangoes. I mean, I was walking through St. Thomas's today, and it was just mangoes everywhere. And I'm saying, why is it so difficult to develop a mango industry? So many persons have mango trees, and imagine having an industry where you can collect all your mangoes and take them to this facility. You'll be paid for them, and this adds to the tourism attraction, because where else would you go and be able to have this mango experience? It can't be just a little icon on your page, but imagine people come here, they can get, we have this entire industry going, people employed in all different sectors, and then you can have your mango cheesecake, your mango jam, your mango wine, your mango rum, everything mango in this development. Because, I mean, these are natural resources that we have, and I can't imagine why people continue to drive back and forth and see all of these mangoes going to waste. Imagine how many persons can be employed to collect mangoes, whether it's in from their own backyards, whether it's in on government land or wherever, knowing that there's a place here where you can bring the mangoes. And you see, we have to think large scale. You cannot think just about doing a little mango processing for the Nevis market. I know people come here from Angola just for mangoes. And if we have mango products, we can export to some of these different places. The critical thing is to understand that it's not so much about how much profit you're going to make. It's about creating employment opportunities.
And a niche.
And a niche, exactly. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. And I can assure you, had you have an NRP government in place and we had access to $400 million, you would definitely see some type of sustainable development where you can provide job opportunities, and it would be an ongoing type of development. And so these are some of the reasons why we are so concerned that there's really no provision for the future development of Nevis as we're seeing it right now. And we're saying that Nevis has enough with regards to natural resources that we can really provide some hope for the youths who are coming out of sixth form, high school year after year. They just need an opportunity and the ability to work. Maybe the premier fees that going out to St. Kitts and begging and asking for what is ours. But the people of Nevis, I know, because I grew up here, and I know that we're very independent minded, and I know that we have a lot of pride, and having to beg, it's rightfully ours. And if we put the necessary legal framework in place, not necessarily framework, but legislative agenda in place, then we wouldn't have to beg. And everybody would know at the end of the month, this is what it is. If the CPI programs make $10, and this is what is ours. And not only that, but, also develop our own, citizenship investment here. There are quite a number of development projects on Nevis that qualify under the citizen. Why do we have to send our applications to St. Kitts for St. Kitts workers to process? Why can't we employ people here in Nevis to manage that aspect of it, and then just have the federal government deal with the vetting for the passport issue? There's so many different ways that we could create employment opportunities for our people here. And I would say that, this is nothing new. We have seen, situations such as that. This is a federal building. Whatever project's going on in here, it is managed by the federal government, but you employ people in Nevis to work there. You don't have to go to St. Kitts for certain matters, because you go to the federal office. They make sure whatever needs to go to St. Kitts for the final stamp, they take it over there, they bring it back, and you just go into the federal office and collect what you need. And one of the things that we look at is, there's still a lag with regards to really updating the type of services that can be provided online. We speak about technology and the need for technology. There's a lot more that we can do electronically that people in Nevis still have to catch a boat and go to St. Kitts to do. And so these are some of the things that we look at, and we know that Nevis could be in a much better position if the focus of the representatives is really on developing Nevis and getting us back to a place where we can be, once again, proud Nevisians, get us back to a place where we can proudly say, Nevis nice.
This government doesn't appear to have a creative bone in its body. I remember in January, as we spoke about the opening of the Pinnis Park, and I visited the day after it officially opened. I think it was a Monday. I explained how I was so impressed with the dozen or so young Nevisians out of the fifth form and the sixth form who were there actually introducing me to Taiwanese-made products. You would think they were in Taipei or Kaohsiung or somewhere. And I suggested that we should be packing these 12 young Nevisians, both male and female, off to Taiwan for the summer. They should have been packing up now. Now their exams are over, to go to a high-tech country, one of the Asian tigers, so that they could understand technology on a higher level, learn more about industry. There are lots of trade fairs in India, in Taiwan. These people should have been getting the exposure. And it's not for want of money. The Taiwanese, I can guarantee you, would have jumped on the idea if only somebody had offered it. Here you're using Nevisian students for your trade fair. Give them some exposure in Taiwan. We know that many, many people from the Federation go there. And then it might have opened their appetite, realizing it's far away but still manageable. They may want to go back there to study. I can't, for the world of me, understand how that incentive was not offered to those children. And their parents should be outraged. They should absolutely be outraged. They should be boarding EVA Airlines or Taiwanese airline and heading across to Asia for the summer.
You see, the focus has to be on helping others and empowering others. And this is something that you can't fake it. You must have that genuine care to see others do better. And then you would see things in a whole different way. But if your focus is only on how can I make myself look good here, how can I get a photo up here, how can I do this to the benefit of my personal and professional development privately, then you're going to miss all of these opportunities that can help the young people of Nevis. And I think fundamentally, I would have had a conversation with someone recently, and I said, if I had $100, my mindset would be to try to share it across as many people as possible. Some other people, their mindset would be to get $100, give it to 2 people and see how much you could get back for yourself. And when the mindset is not there to help others, you would miss what would seem clear as day to you and I would be oblivious to other people. And these are the natural type of characteristics that you would want to have when you want to empower and advance your youths in such a way that they can then contribute to nation building. And so I'm not surprised as at where we are right now with regards to the dissolution of the government, because there really wasn't any consideration about how the people would be impacted. And this ties right into what opportunities can you provide. If it's all about self and what should I do in order to advance myself, then you miss certain opportunities. Because here we are, and we're looking at 2 elections in Nevis within less than 1 year, and we don't have the resources. And so how do we make these decisions? I mean, how difficult would it have been to simply submit your cabinet paper or submit your bill to say this is what we would want? And I find it interesting that there is some pushback to having an independent entity to do an analysis, because if Nevis is saying it's not getting its fair share, and St. Kitts is saying, well, this is what you asked for and this should be your fair share, who knows what goes on with all the different matters. And so if an independent entity ought to come in, because obviously for 7 years Nevis could not figure out what our fair share was. In recent times we would have seen some calculations presented and say this is what it ought to be. But if you have two islands and they have different differing opinions, then I think at least the best case scenario is that both would agree on who should be the independent entity, or else we would be exactly where we are, going back and forth each time. And so that level of understanding that in order to have a solution that is sustainable, you really need to have as many different perspectives as possible, and not just seeing it from your view and your view only, and the other person seeing it from their view and their view only. And so you must have that willingness and that openness to accept input from others, and to recognize that you don't know it all.
I think we've got a caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Hello, good night.
Hi, good night.
Night.
I have some kind of serious comments to make.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, from when did Mark Brantley became the Premier of Nevis?
17th or 18th of December in 2017, 4 years and 10 months ago.
4 years and 10 months ago.
Mm-hmm. 4 years and, well, more than 4 years, either 7 or 10 months, somewhere in that vicinity. December will make 5 years.
Okay, let's just put it this way. Because certain things are being leveled against him, right?
Uh-huh.
Concerning the $400 million. He's not accountable for the full amount. He could only be accounted for the time he became the Premier of Nevis. That is what you all must take into account.
Okay.
And you who answered me just now, right? I call from St. Kitts.
I know that, yeah.
You who answered me just a while ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
1st of August 1970, when Christina stunk, how much when Christina stunk, and how much young people and Nevis suffered the loss of their the parent? How much money was collected? And Nevis got nothing at all. Wasn't that one of the major reasons why NRP was formed?
Yes, exactly. 2 months after the Christina disaster.
What you all should be doing now, right?
Mm-hmm.
This election should be a collective with NRP and CCM to get the right amount of money for Nevis since 1970 until now.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yeah, listening.
Until now, Nevis has not yet gotten what is deserving unto them. What is the real problem that's going on presently now? Because I'll tell you something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hear two ladies from Nevis. One of them they call her Baby Bartlett.
Mm-hmm.
And next one named Rosalie. I do not know her title. That's a wicked knock-me.
I know them both from Craddock Road.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As a little boy, my mother used to sell cake. And 1 week, when my mother was sick, and she wrote a letter to me, the Baby Bartlett and Rosalie, the letter. And because of Nevis people who was bringing down these fruit, vegetables, and animals, that's how St. Kitts people end up develop. We cannot be separated. I cannot see why you all cannot come to terms to understand that this election is not about NRP, it's not about NRP and CCM. This election should be Nevis John supposed to get the right amount of money. If this thing started something Christina think,
Mm-hmm.
NRP was formed out of that. And this is what you all must take into consideration. When NIA come about, we all got our own differences between that. When it comes to the federal election, go out and tell Nevis people how much people in Nevis, their grandchildren and children suffered. Hello?
We're listening. We're still listening. We're glued into you.
How much people in Nevis suffered because of what took place of the 1st of August 1970. How could I do? I bring up, I was on a badge, bring up a truck could dig well in Nevis 1985. Rougher, and them kind of people could talk about it. Of him, Brookhill.
Ruffer is no longer with us. He passed away.
Okay, so I'm speaking of, right? As a little boy, 1985, 25 years.
Yeah.
You are was able to get brand new truck what could dig well. What have become of? Because the man from St. Kitts named Jerome Pinney, you know.
Well, he's from Nevis, Zion.
Jerome Pinney. If we follow the life and works of this man, right, we'll know who is the great, who is the best politician of Nevis, you know. Because he was hired by the Nevis administration to, you know. This is a man who went on the Caribbean and was instrumental. Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad, and around the Caribbean digging well. What have become of these wells?
We still have wells in Nevis. Some of our water comes from wells.
The era when the same Jerome Pinney, I know him from Sandy Point.
Well, he has Sandy Point connections, but also Zion
I know
Nevis.
him because I worked along with him. Because I was speaking of.
Yeah.
And then again, you have this man, Merchant, Aiko.
Augustine Merchant.
Augustine Merchant, by he and Ally Body. When we think we both Nevis and Augustine Merchant and Ally Body getting the wicked. But no. There's how we won the game.
Yep.
No, you have to get the two of them out of the wicked. And then, you know, we beat Nevis.
Yeah. What's your name? What's your name, may I ask?
My name is?
Yeah.
I'll spell my name for you. Because my name is kind of cheery. K-O S-H-R-O-Y. Koshroy.
Tweed?
Koshroy Tweed.
Tweed, yeah, okay.
Because it's like, we cannot remember Sakaro. Sahara. Two boats. Valiant and Weapon Storm, Sakaro gone. Those two boats used to bring animals, a fishing boat used to push these two boats along with sail pushing them come to St. Kitts. Kitty Sons, we build our life. Tunhan, we call them Tunhan. And my mother is Tunhan until now. That's how we grew up. You understand what I'm speaking of? Let me talk about baby Bartlett.
Yeah.
I grew up baby Bartlett, son named Arville. Arville, because he spent time living with my mother when they were building Fort Thomas Hotel.
Okay.
That's how much the link between me and Nevis. You understand what I'm speaking of?
Yeah, well, it's so good for you to call us tonight, but could you wrap it up now? The main point you think...
I'll call back in again another day.
Hello?
I'll call back again another.
Yeah, very nice talking with you. Thank you very much. I think his key point is that that Nevisians should band themselves together to make this fight. But this is an aspect I intended to deal with tonight. Because even within the same party, the CCM, the late Van Samuel was premier for the first 2 years and 7 months of Team Unity. And I've been struggling to find one example of how he was supported by the now premier. And the now premier has been in for 4 years and change. And I also struggle to see how the late premier was assisting him in getting Nevis's fair share. As a matter of fact, I guarantee you that if the help had come in a meaningful way, Mark Brantley would be saying in this election, do this one for Van Samuel. But he seems mortally afraid of going there and doesn't even want to mention his name, because it's a well-documented story in Nevis that even though he claimed that he got the mantle in the smoothest transition in the history of mankind, when Moses passed the baton to Joshua, who hasn't taken us to the promised land, we know all was not well. They didn't seem to be on the same page. So we hear the caller that all parties should be coming together, but I know you have many occasions when you reached out to the Premier during the COVID fight, the worst pandemic in 100 years, and you got the cold shoulder.
Well, he would have reached out to us, and we knew his game plan. If we didn't respond, he would say he reached out and we didn't respond. And but we really wanted to ensure that the people of Nevis, especially during that pandemic period, were listened to. And we would have heard a number of concerns, a number of issues raised by them. And it really came down to where people, based on our conversations with them, would have been more comfortable being guided by their personal physicians. And this is something that we would have expressed, and that was not his way, that was not his style. And there's some people who feel that as a leader, the leader must say and the leader must dictate what should happen. That definitely is not our style. We feel that you should be as inclusive as possible and listen to people and then respond accordingly. And so, I can appreciate what the caller is thinking and what he would like to see. The issue really is that with one party having 3 seats, I don't see how you could get stronger representation from Nevis if you have 2 different parties with 2 different philosophies, 2 different approaches to solving problems, at a table. I think this was the best opportunity for Nevis. Not only did you have 3 representatives from the same party who should share the same philosophy and approach to getting things done, but you also had an agreement that was executed by the leader, the former leader of that party. And so it was just a matter for the Premier and his colleagues to champion that cause. And so if it is that he did not advance it because it had, no pun intended, the Vance signature, then you must question why he had the Charleston Accord. Maybe he wanted an accord that he signed. I don't know. But you had the Charleston Accord signed by the former leader of the party, former Premier. Mark said he drafted it. And so why did he not advance the Charleston Accord and have it legislated? Take out the pertinent sections. We saw where they took out the section that spoke to the motion of no confidence. They had that legislated, and that is the reason why the Prime Minister had to act within the time period that he did, and we did not see the long drawn out issue as we had with then Prime Minister Douglas. And so here is one situation where the Charleston Accord set out to address that, even though it's supposed to be about Nevis, but this particular matter was included. That is fine. But how can you legislate the provision for motion of no confidence and not legislate the provision for Nevis's fair share? So one must try to understand what was the thinking, because on one hand we're saying, well, this is an agreement that was made and people should uphold the agreement.
Oh, hold it there. We've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening, Mr. Miles.
Hi, good evening.
Nevisians, from way back until today, all of us have acknowledged that when it comes to the treatment of Nivision in relation to our resources. Nevis has always gotten the short change. All of us acknowledge that, whether it's NRP or CCM or whoever. The bigger issue here, Steve, is this. Under that condition, Simeon Daniel and the NRP was able to come together and made Nevis the icon of the Caribbean. Quoting Mark Brantley, that they gave Nevis an ethos and an island to be proud of. Okay, so we became a proud people, not dependent upon St. Kitts. We, as a people, chose in 1992 to remove that outstanding government and put in a CCM government. A CCM government that went to St. Kitts and fought St. Kitts for money. In 2006, again, we changed them and we brought back in an NRP party, which according to the present Premier and our present Prime Minister, received not a penny from St. Kitts. And we did not cost and we did not force. We went to work together and to make Nevis again proud of itself by working on our own. Again, we're going back to a CCM administration. And the worst thing that has ever happened to Nevis is Mark Brantley as the Premier of Nevis. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so Nevisians, even though we were not treated fairly financially from the federal government, under none of the administrations, I must give Timothy Harris some credit. At least he acknowledged that he gave us $400 million over the time. The Premier of Nevis has now come around to acknowledge and accept the fact that we got that. But prior to that, NRP has demonstrated that with nothing we can work, because we have the know-how, the wherewithal, the commitment, and the love of Ireland to go out and work independently to make ourselves proud. And again, to you, Janice, and to your team, I really appreciate you all, and you have the very same vision, this very same zest, and you even have greater knowledge now than those who went before to take Nevis forward from this present situation that we are in. I hope that the people of Nevis will rise up and give you and your team the chance to once again put Nevis in a place, and then according to Mark Brantley, an island where we can be proud again as a people, because we are looking after our own selves. Thank you.
Caller, don't go, please. Are you there?
Still here.
I brought along 2 sheets of paper. One gold, one blue. Why do you think the Premier, who has put all his eggs in one basket, fair share, has not taken the time to sit down with his newfound friend in St. Kitts to fashion Charlestown Accord 2?
One of it, that the Premier of Nevis knows very well that the PAM faction headed by Sean Richards did absolutely nothing from the sign that Charlestown Accord first time around to push anything on the agenda for Nevis. He also knows that as a Premier he has failed in that regard, because from day one, when they came out with this accord, they were told that will not go anywhere unless it is in the law. And so, the great liar he was told to go and get it codified. He refused to. The present Prime Minister, when he started to make noise, just about 2 months ago, or 3 months ago, said to him, this thing has never been brought to the cabinet or to Parliament. Being a great liar, we think that the very next day he'd have been running down and said, listen, this is here it is now. Let us take it to cabinet, discuss it in cabinet. He had the majority on his side. So that to discuss it there, and then if Harris did not do anything, then come back and say, well, we put it there in Parliament, we tried to table it in cabinet, it was shut down, and then I would have given him some sympathy. But he does not have the ability to develop anything in regards to what he's talking about. He is talking because he can talk. But tell him to put a formula together and put it to the Prime Minister. He doesn't have the capacity to do it, and he will not get the capacity to do it. Why? Because he believes that he knows it all, and he's not open to learning and to understanding. I think the Nevis Reformation Party starting with Kelvin Daly way back then, and now come with Janice and her team. If he had taken their advice on board, things would have been better for him financially, and for us. We would not have been fighting about this. But wise people gave him advice, and he refused to take the advice. And Solomon says only a fool refused to take sound and good advice.
Okay, caller, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Janice, 7 minutes is all, 8 minutes is all we've got tonight.
Yeah, I was just looking through a document here because I think it was in the 2018 throne speech where it was recognized by Premier Brantley that he needed to legislate the Charleston Accord.
Hold it, we've got another caller. Caller, you've got to make it very quick. You're on.
Hello, good night.
Hi, good night.
I would like to remind the people of Nevis, right? 2017, we paid off the IMF. How come we're still paying Nevisians are paying 70% back? You have a bank. How come we still paying 17% back? Answer the question before you all go tonight.
Okay.
That is labeled on Tenkes, is labeled on Nevis.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you see, the challenge is that on Sinkits you would receive a salary increase to try to balance the high cost of living. On Nevis, we are struggling because, you know, public servants are not able to get the salary increase that it's needed. I mean, a salary increase is not only some people look at it for different reasons, but when you look at the high cost of living based on what's going on in the external world, you must make adjustments locally. And so we here in Nevis, we are struggling, and we are going to be struggling because we have not built any necessary programs and put any infrastructure in place to help to address the high cost of living. And there is no way at this point. We have not built on the wind farm that we have. We have not utilized solar energy. We have not advanced geothermal energy. And so we are entirely dependent on the high cost of oil that we have no control over. And so what are we going to do? You know, people are starting to not turn on certain appliances, getting a little gas stove to put to the side so that they don't have to use electric stove, going back to cold showers. There's so many adjustments that are going to be made. But the challenge is, even where we are right now, you know, you don't use any electricity, but you still have to pay the surcharge as long as you have access to the electricity. And so we in Nevis, we have really found ourselves in a terrible position with regards to keeping up with the high cost of living and not getting the necessary salary increases to help to buffer that. Now, the salary increase is not really going to help that much because we have seen increases on the water bill of up to, you know, whatever percentage increase from $10 to $25 dollars. And so you keep seeing this increase in taxes, and this all has to do back to what, you know, my classmate Larry would have said. What have we done in Nevis to generate revenues in Nevis? And so when we're not generating revenues, the only option left is to tax the people. And so whereas in 2018 there were efforts, the Premier himself would have said that the VAT is too high and we need to take steps to reduce it. We're now in 2022 and no measures have been taken. And so, at the end of the day, we see we're in a position where the cost of living in Nevis is getting higher and higher. We recognize that our the salaries of public servants is not being increased, and it's really a struggle for people. And it must be laid squarely on the shoulders of the Premier, who has been negligent in the federal government, negligent in his duties as Premier and administering the NIA. And as the caller would have said, we really do hope that the people of Nevis recognize that, and as my colleague Jay would have said, the NRP would have done more with less, and the people of Nevis were in a much better position with regards to the standard of living. And so under the CCM government, with millions of dollars, we still managed to find ourselves in a budget deficit. We are not seeing any improvements. The masses have not felt the impact of $400 million circulating in Nevis. And so it's really a question as to where do we go from here? Do we turn around and say, this is not working? We took a chance with CCM. They have failed us. I think this is something that I'm hearing more and more people, as they become aware of the issues and why we're in this position right now, that the Premier really had not put Nevis as its priority in terms of decision making.
The Premier and his colleagues came here last Wednesday and announced that they were putting up $120,000 of their own money. When collectively, between the three of them, they brought in over $100,000 on December 22nd for double salary, and then come in the new year to say they'll fail, that to me is giving the people back their money. In an election season, I consider that a bribe. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm thankful that they can find it in their hearts to give something back, but you have a tree and it's bending. After a while it would take shape, to be a little bit more resilient. When people needed help during the pandemic, he took to these same microphones and condemned women. People were struggling. They cut off the electricity. People were struggling. You did not see any compassion. And so the question must be asked, why now? Why now? He would have said that the employment in Nevis is higher. That's what he would have said. I have not verified that situation. But it is clear that the decision making of the Premier is contingent upon receiving something. It's what we call transactional. And so we hear about the certain waivers of certain fees, etc. And this was never done before. So you cannot make a connection between the economic situation and the reason for certain things, because when people needed the help most,
election coming.
When people needed the help most, he was quite absent. But now there's a benefit for him. There's something that he wants, and so he's going to try to give out to persons. So
30 seconds, meetings for this week. Meetings, political meetings. You don't have it with you?
No, I think we are focusing on house to house.
Oh, this week.
We're focusing on house to house this week. The Music Fest is coming up.
Oh, yes.
Later this week, and so we're going to be mostly doing house to house. I do want, however, before I leave, to extend again sympathies to Stucky and Karen and Sharon and Anne and all of the family there for Pombi Boy, and to my friends Deborah and Catherine and Lincoln on the passing of their father Luther Williams. And I just want to say to the people of Nevis, this federal election coming up is like none ever before, and please do not take it for granted. Nevis is going on a downward trend, And this is the opportunity, maybe the only opportunity,
To make
for
Nevis nice again.
to make Nevis nice again. Thank you.
Good night. That's our show. We're at the top of the hour. Make sure you join us next week for Your Voice with the NRP.
Thank you.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited